Want truly homemade sweaters? Try raising your own goats.
Goats are valuable not just for their milk and meat, or for their ability to control weeds and help renew grasslands, or even for their ability to be gentle around children. Goats can also be valuable for their hair. Cashmere goats produce cashmere, and Angora goats produce... Did you think we were going to say Angora? No, Angora fiber comes from rabbits. Angora goats produce mohair. Mohair is used in sweaters, scarves, coats, and other products, including floor coverings and doll hair. The United States is a leading producer of mohair, along with South Africa and Turkey. America's top producing state is Texas. An adult Angora can produce as much as 7 kilograms of hair each year. As the goats grow older, however, their hair becomes thicker and less valuable. Hair from white or solid-colored goats is the most popular, but the appeal of mixed-color mohair has grown. Angora goats are also used as show animals. They require little special care. The animals need milk from their mothers for 3 or 4 months. They reach full maturity when they are a little more than 2 years old. But even then, they are smaller than most sheep and milk goats. Cashmere goats are generally larger than Angoras. They can grow big enough to be kept with sheep and cattle. The outer hair of the animal is called guard hair. Behind it is the valuable material on a cashmere goat. Cashmere is valued for its softness and warmth without much weight. Some farmers comb their cashmere goats to remove the hair. But if the animals do get a haircut, it often takes place at the time when they naturally lose their winter coat, between December and March. Angora goats generally get their hair cut 2 times a year, in the spring and fall. The job can be done with simple cutting tools or by hiring a professional shearer. Angoras may need special protection from the cold for about a month after shearing. The value of an animal's coat depends on the age, size, and condition. But whatever kind of goat you choose, be sure you have a good fence. Goats love to explore.
A quick lesson in ways businesses are organized.
Businesses are structured in different ways to meet different needs. The simplest form of business is called an individual or sole proprietorship. The proprietor owns all of the property of the business and is responsible for everything. For legal purposes, with this kind of business, the owner and the company are the same. This means the proprietor gets to keep all of the profits of the business, but must also pay any debts. Another kind of business is the partnership. 2 or more people go into business together. An agreement is usually needed to decide how much of the partnership each person controls. One kind of partnership is called a limited liability partnership. These have full partners and limited partners. Limited partners may not share as much in the profits, but they also have less responsibility for the business. Doctors, lawyers, and accountants often form partnerships to share their risks and profits. A husband and wife can form a business partnership together. Partnerships exist only for as long as the owners remain alive. The same is true of individual proprietorships. But corporations are designed to have an unlimited lifetime. A corporation is the most complex kind of business organization. Corporations can sell stock as a way to raise money. Stock represents shares of ownership in a company. Investors who buy stock can trade their shares or keep them as long as the company is in business. A company might use some of its earnings to pay dividends as a reward to shareholders. Or the company might reinvest the money back into the business. If shares lose value, investors can lose all of the money they paid for their stock. But shareholders are not responsible for the debts of the corporation. A corporation is recognized as an entity, its own legal being, separate from its owners. A board of directors controls corporate policies. The directors appoint top company officers. The directors might or might not hold shares in the corporations. Corporations can have a few major shareholders, or ownership can be spread among the general public. But not all corporations are traditional businesses that sell stock. Some non-profit groups are also organized as corporations.
After 50 years, lasers have made their mark.
This week, we tell about one of the most recognizable objects in science fiction, the laser. And we tell how the laser has made its mark in the 50 years since its invention.
3 professional research groups have been leading a year-long celebration of the laser's 50th anniversary. It is called Laserfest. The American Physical Society, the Optical Society, and SPIE, a group that supports the study of light, all have been involved. One goal is to honor the early developers of lasers who were both scientists and business leaders. Another goal is to show the public that lasers are a great example of how scientific research can result in technology that improves economies everywhere. And Laserfest is also meant to inspire young people to take up careers in optical science and engineering.
Laser stands for light amplification by stimulated emission of radiation. The idea behind lasers is complex. Just how complex? Consider that it took the mind of Albert Einstein to discover the physics behind the laser. Theodore Maiman succeeded in building the first working laser in 1960. Mr. Maiman worked at Hughes Research Laboratories in Malibu, California. A laser fires a light beam. Before the laser, scientists developed a similar device, a maser, which stands for microwave amplification by stimulated emission of radiation. A maser is basically a microwave version of the laser. Microwaves are a form of electromagnetic radiation, similar to, but shorter than, radio waves. The best-known use of masers is in highly accurate clocks. In the 1950s, researchers in the United States and Russia independently developed the technology that made both masers and lasers possible. Charles Townes was a professor at the Massachusetts Institute of Technology in Cambridge, Massachusetts. He and his students developed the first maser. Russians Nikolai Basov and Alexander Prokhorov did their research in Moscow. Their work led to technology important to lasers and masers. The three men received the Nobel Prize in Physics in 1964.
The idea of a thin beam of light with deadly power came much earlier. By the end of the 1800s, the Industrial Revolution had shown that science could invent machines with almost magical powers. And some writers of the time were the first to imagine something like a laser. In 1898, H.G. Wells published a science fiction novel called The War of the Worlds. In it, he described creatures from the planet Mars that had technology far beyond anything on Earth. Among their weapons was what Wells called a heat ray. Listen to actor Orson Welles describe the weapon in a famous radio broadcast of The War of the Worlds from 1938.
I shall refer to the mysterious weapon as a heat ray. It's my guess that in some way they are able to generate an intense heat in a chamber of practically absolute non-conductivity. This intense heat they project in a parallel beam against any object they choose by means of a polished parabolic mirror of unknown composition, much as the mirror of a lighthouse projects a beam of light. That is my conjecture of the origin of the heat ray.
H.G. Wells' description is not too far from the truth. All lasers have several things in common. They have a material that supplies electrons and a power source that lifts the energy level of those electrons. And, as Wells guessed, many lasers have mirrors that direct light. Laser light is different from daylight or most electric lights. It has one wavelength or color. Laser light is also highly organized. Light behaves like a wave, and laser light launches in one orderly wave at a time from its source.
The physics of the laser may be complex. Still, it is just a story of how electrons interact with light. When a light particle, or photon, hits an electron, the electron jumps to a higher energy state. If another photon strikes one of these high-energy electrons, the electron releases two photons that travel together at the same wavelength. When this process is repeated enough, lots of organized or coherent photons are produced. In Theodore Mamon's first laser, a rod of man-made ruby supplied the electrons. A more powerful version of the flash on a common camera was used to lift the energy state of the electrons. Mirrors on either side of the ruby rod reflected and increased the light, and an opening at one end of the rod let the laser light shoot out, just like the flash ray of science fiction hero Buck Rogers.
Our flash rays are working like lightning now. They destroy everything in their path.
Industry put lasers to work almost immediately after they were invented in 1960. But weapons were not first on the list. The first medical operation using a laser took place the year following its invention. Doctors Charles Campbell and Charles Coster used a laser to remove a tumor from a patient's eye at Columbia Presbyterian Hospital in New York City. Since then, doctors have used lasers to cut and remove tissue safely with little risk of infections. Other health uses include medical imaging and vision correction surgery. Eye surgeons use lasers in LASIK operations to reshape the cornea, which covers the lens of the eye. The reshaped cornea corrects the patient's bad eyesight so he or she does not have to wear glasses or other corrective lenses.
Lasers have made measurement an exact science. Astronomers have used lasers to measure the moon's distance from Earth to within a few centimeters. Mappers and builders use laser technology every day. For example, drawing a perfectly level straight line on a construction site is easy using a laser. Energy researchers are using lasers in an attempt to develop fusion, the same energy process that powers the sun. Scientists hope fusion can supply almost limitless amounts of clean energy in the future. Lasers have also changed the way we communicate. It is likely that laser light on a fiber optic network carried this explorations program at least part of the way to you if you are reading or listening online. Super-fast internet connections let people watch movies and send huge amounts of information at the speed of light. Manufacturers have used lasers for years to cut and join metal parts. And the jewelry industry uses lasers to write on the surface of the world's hardest substance, diamonds.
Since 1974, the public has had direct experience with lasers at the grocery store checkout line. Laser barcode scanners have changed how stores record almost everything. They help businesses keep track of products. They help in storage and every detail of the supply process. Experts say no company has put barcode technology to better use than Walmart, based in Bentonville, Arkansas. By 1988, all Walmart stores use laser barcode scanners. Highly detailed records on its products and how they were selling helped Walmart keep costs down. Today, Walmart is the world's biggest corporation.
Lasers are found in many products used almost everywhere. Laser printers can print out forms and documents quickly and are relatively low in cost. They are required equipment for offices around the world. If you have a CD or DVD player, you own a laser. Laserdisc players use lasers to accurately read or write marks on a reflective coated plastic disc. A device turns these optical signals into digital information that becomes music, computer software, or a full-length movie.
Over 100 years ago, writers imagined that beams of light could be powerful weapons. Today, lasers guide missiles and bombs. For example, pilots can mark a target invisibly with a laser. Bombs or missiles then track the target with deadly results. And yes, American defense companies are working on giant laser guns, recognizable to science fiction fans everywhere. But there are technological difficulties. Scientific American magazine says huge lasers turn only about 20 to 30% of the energy they use into a laser beam. The rest is lost as heat. That has not stopped scientists from working to perfect powerful lasers that one day may be able to shoot missiles out of the sky.
Bernanke says Federal Reserve will act if U.S. economy weakens.
The United States Central Bank is prepared to take further actions to support the economy if conditions get a lot worse. Federal Reserve Chairman Ben Bernanke gave that message in a speech Friday in which he discussed possible steps. These include buying more securities in an effort to push down longer-term interest rates and increase economic growth. He spoke in Jackson Hole, Wyoming, where the Fed holds a yearly conference for central bankers and other international guests. Mr. Bernanke says it is reasonable to expect some increase in economic growth starting next year. Stocks ended the day higher after his speech. It followed a number of reports this week that added to concerns about the slow speed of recovery from the recession. On Friday, the Commerce Department lowered its estimate for the gross domestic product. GDP is the widest measure of the economy. It measures goods and services produced in the United States. The latest report said the economy grew at an annual rate of 1.6% between April and June. That was less than the early estimate of 2.4%. Still, it was not as bad as many economists had predicted. The report said the economy grew 3.7% from January to March. Many economists say the country needs a growth rate of at least 2.5% just to keep unemployment from rising. The jobless rate was 9.5% in July. The slowing in GDP largely resulted from a sharp increase in imports. Imports of goods and services increased almost 3 times as fast in the second quarter as in the first 3 months of the year. Exports slowed. Earlier this week, a report said manufacturing grew less in July than economists had predicted. Not all the reports were bad. The Labor Department said the number of first-time claims for unemployment aid fell for the first time in 4 weeks. But more Americans are having trouble making monthly payments on their home loans. The Mortgage Bankers Association reported that between April and June, almost 10% of homeowners were at least 1 month late. Housing helped lead economic recoveries in the past, but this time the housing market not only helped create the recession, many economists say it is also limiting the recovery. The Commerce Department reported that sales of newly built houses dropped 12% between June and July. They fell to the lowest level since records began in 1963. The National Association of Realtors reported that sales of existing homes fell 27% in July. Sales of single-family homes were at their lowest level since records began 15 years ago. Jed Smith directs research for the association. He says the big drop in sales was largely because of the end of a federal tax credit for first-time homebuyers.
Unemployment is fairly high, and people are scared. And when people are scared, or are recovering from being scared, they don't necessarily run out and buy a house right away.
GM to test investors' hunger for risk with stock offering.
America's biggest car maker accepted $50 billion in federal aid from the Obama and Bush administrations. People joked that GM meant Government Motors. Now, General Motors could be on the road to recovery. The company recorded over $2.5 billion in profit in the first half of the year. The government still owns 61% of GM as a result of the bailout. Canada is also a shareholder, but now GM plans to sell stock to the public again. GM spent just 40 days in bankruptcy. It sought protection from its creditors in June of last year. GM restructured. It discontinued some vehicles and closed dealerships and factories. In April, GM repaid almost $7 billion in government loans. Many of its creditors are waiting to see how much they get. GM plans an IPO, an initial public offering of stock, later this year. The company could raise as much as $15 billion. Chief Executive Edward Whittaker is leaving September 1st. He wants the government to sell all of its shares in the company during the IPO. Many experts believe the Treasury will act slowly over time after the public offering is completed. If the stock price rises, the government could profit from the rescue. But the IPO is risky for the company. The offering will test the willingness of investors to take an equity share in the new GM. Buying equity is not like buying bonds. Bonds represent a loan. Equity represents ownership. Investors willing to buy equity shares in a company expect one thing: growth. GM believes it can make that happen, in part with a new electric and gas hybrid.
Chevy Volt, a car that can go up to 40 miles before it uses any gas at all. That's an American revolution.
The Volt is expected to start arriving in showrooms later this year. GM is also looking overseas. The world's fastest-growing car markets are in developing nations. GM is now selling more cars in China than in the United States. GM still leads the American market, though Toyota is now the biggest car company in the world. There are signs that America's Big Three may have put the worst of their recent troubles behind them. Chrysler also went through bankruptcy and says its sales are up. Italy's Fiat holds a 20% share. Ford Motor Company avoided bankruptcy and refused government help. Ford reported close to $5 billion in profit for the first 6 months of the year.
Verizon and Google propose rules of the road for the Internet.
Last week, Verizon and Google proposed a plan they say could keep the Internet open while supporting investment in high-speed Internet service. Verizon has the nation's biggest wireless network, while Google is the biggest Internet search engine. The proposal was a surprise because the two companies have been on opposite sides of the debate over net neutrality. That is the idea that all content on the web should be treated equally. Internet service providers want to be able to charge more for heavy Internet traffic or users who want special services. The Federal Communications Commission regulates telephone, cable, and satellite communications, but its power to regulate Internet service has been questioned in the courts. The new proposal calls for rules barring service providers from preventing users from sending and receiving legal information of any kind. Users also could not be prevented from linking any application, service, or device they choose to the web. And broadband Internet providers would be barred from discriminating against content and would have to be open about their policies. Supporters of net neutrality criticize the proposal for not including wireless providers. Wireless broadband is among the fastest-growing parts of the Internet. Others oppose the creation of a two-tiered system on the Internet in which some content gets a fast lane and other content goes slowly. But Daniel Brenner says such a system already exists.
In some ways, there are two tiers today. In other words, there's the public Internet, which we all use for web surfing and email and sometimes for voice. And then there are managed networks.
Daniel Brenner is a partner at the law firm Hogan Lovells in Washington. He says service providers want to be able to charge more because they build networks out to their customers across the country. Such companies are the so-called last-mile providers. But the Internet is really a network of networks which exchange traffic all the time and compete with each other. And not all networks reach the last mile to a customer's door. Paul Koropas of Global Crossing says his company wants to make sure agreements between service providers are honored on all networks. That way, a service promised by Global Crossing on its fiber optic network will be extended all the way to a customer's door, even if another company carries the service that last mile. The Verizon-Google proposal offers suggestions for a debate that is not likely to end soon. Daniel Brenner says the FCC needs clearer guidelines from Congress.